The dock had a loose board near the far end that groaned every time someone stood on it. That was the first problem. The second was Layla. The third was that she took one look at the narrow daybed in my sister's sunroom, looked at me, and said, completely straight-faced, "I promise I won't steal the blanket." Which was a lie, and she absolutely knew it. 3 hours earlier, I had still believed I was making the drive to Muskoka alone. My sister Piper had rented a cottage on Lake Rosso for what she called a pre-wedding planning weekend. Vendor spreadsheets, centerpiece debates, the particular exhaustion of standing in cold lake water, while your fiancé argued about rehearsal dinner playlists. I came because Piper texted me, "If you care about me at all, bring extra citronella candles and stop Russell from building the fire pit with instructions he downloaded from YouTube." So I loaded the car on Friday afternoon with bug spray, a cooler full of bows, and absolutely no reason to expect Layla Okafor to be standing at the end of the gravel path when I pulled in. I hadn't spoken to her in 8 months, not properly, not beyond one accidental exchange in the comments of a mutual friend's Instagram post in January, where we both typed "lol congrats" about the same promotion and somehow managed not to acknowledge each other at all. That's what people do when they're hurt and too proud to move first. Her name was Layla, and for most of my adult life, she'd been the first person I called when anything happened. Good things, bad things, flat tire at midnight on the 401 things, 3 in the morning, I think I'm making a huge mistake things. We met second year at Carleton. She was ahead of me in the library print queue. Her document had disappeared somewhere between her laptop and the university's ancient network, and she turned to me with a completely calm expression and said, "Do you have $15 I can borrow for a USB drive from the bookstore?" "We've never met," I said. "I know," she said, "but you look like someone who brings a backup plan." I didn't have a backup plan, but I had $15, and she paid me back the next morning with a Tim's double-double and an hour of conversation that neither of us was in any hurry to end. After that, she became part of my life. So gradually, I never noticed the exact moment it happened. Late-night cram sessions that turned into late-night everything-else sessions. Skating the Rideau Canal in February because she'd never done it, and I refused to let that go uncorrected. She fell twice and blamed the rental skates both times, and I didn't argue because she was right. A road trip to Quebec City where we got lost twice, argued about directions for 40 minutes, and ate the best poutine I've ever had in a restaurant with no sign and 4 tables. The summer she lost her grandmother and didn't want to be alone, but also didn't want to talk about it, so we just sat on the roof of my apartment building with bad coffee and watched the city go dark until she was ready. The winter, I was certain. I was failing a course that would have pulled my average below the threshold for my program, and she showed up with her notes and her calm and 3 hours she didn't have to spare. She knew how I went quiet when I was overwhelmed and how I talked too much when I was anxious. I knew that she reorganized things when she was stressed, and that "I'm fine" from her meant the opposite. People made comments. They always do. My sister Piper watched us once try to split a dinner bill. I wanted to pay because she'd driven. She wanted to pay because I'd covered the previous round. And Piper just looked at us across the table and said, "You two are either in love or in a hostage negotiation. I genuinely can't tell which." Layla laughed. So did I. And then we kept doing what we always did, which was staying close enough to matter and not honest enough to do anything with it. The end came fast and from a direction I hadn't expected. I found out Layla had accepted a consulting position in Vancouver from a LinkedIn notification. Not a phone call, not a text, a small banner at the top of my screen between a recruiter message from someone called Talent Bridge and a connection request from someone named Brad. I stared at it for longer than made sense. Then I called her. The line rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again that night, same. I told myself that said enough. I told myself she'd already decided, already checked out of her life in Ottawa, and that finding out through LinkedIn was just the final confirmation of something I'd been avoiding naming. So I didn't try a third time. I put my phone on the kitchen counter and finished the contract job I was working on and spent the next several weeks telling myself I was fine, which is a remarkable thing to do when you are clearly not fine at all. She left in October. I knew because Russell mentioned it. I didn't respond to his text for 3 days. So when I stepped out of the car that Friday afternoon and saw Layla on my sister's porch, hands tucked into the front pocket of her hoodie, travel mug in one hand, I went completely still before any useful thought arrived. She looked as surprised as I was, then guarded, then in a way that felt familiar, just tired. "Piper didn't tell you I was coming," she said. It wasn't really a question. "No," I said, "she didn't." Behind her, my sister appeared in the cottage doorway with the expression of a woman who had made a decision and was completely at peace with the consequences. "I invited you both," Piper said, "because I am not spending my wedding weekend watching you two pretend to be strangers." She looked at each of us in turn. "You have a whole weekend. You're adults. Act accordingly." "Piper," I started. "Russell is trying to start the barbecue," she said, already retreating inside. "Someone should probably go supervise." That was how the weekend started. The cottage had 3 bedrooms. Piper and Russell had the main one. 2 of Piper's friends from work had driven up Thursday and claimed the bunk room. The 3rd bedroom had a window that hadn't sealed properly all summer, and by now had enough mosquitoes inside to qualify as a separate ecosystem, which left exactly one usable sleeping surface. The daybed in the sunroom off the kitchen. Narrow. 1 set of blankets. No neutral middle ground. I laughed when Piper told me. Layla didn't. "You're both adults," Piper said again, in the tone of a woman who considers this a complete answer. It might have been easier to act on if Layla and I had any idea how to be in the same room without all the unresolved things arriving ahead of us. We spent dinner talking around each other. Russell asked me how the contract work had gone. I answered. Piper's friend Gwen asked Layla about Vancouver, and Layla talked about it the way you talk about something that is going fine, but not quite the way you'd imagined. The lake went orange and then dark. We worked through most of the cooler, and Piper kept glancing between us like she was waiting for one of us to do something useful with our evening. It didn't happen until the cottage went quiet. The fire had burned low. The temperature had dropped the way it does in Muskoka in late August after 10, not quite fall yet, but not really summer anymore either. The cottage creaked in the breeze off the water. One by one, everyone else drifted off until Layla and I were the only 2 left in the sunroom, sitting on opposite ends of the daybed with 1 lamp burning between us and a silence that had been accumulating for 8 months. She reached over and clicked the lamp off. "You probably want the left side," she said in the dark. "You always slept better on the left." That was such a specific thing to remember. I didn't know what to do with it. "Yeah," I said, "thanks." We lay there for a while. The lake made small sounds outside. The old wood of the cottage settled and creaked. I could hear her breathing, too careful to be asleep. Then she said quietly, "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." A pause. "Why didn't you call me back?" That wasn't what I'd been expecting. I turned my head toward her. The room was dark enough that I could only make out her outline. "I did call you," I said, "twice, in October. You didn't pick up." Silence. "When in October?" she said. "Right after the LinkedIn notification. I called the night I found out, and then again the next evening." Another silence, longer. "What number did you call?" Something in my chest slowed down. "Your number," I said, "the one I'd always had." She was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, "I changed my number in September, switched plans to get ready for BC rates. I was certain I'd texted you the new one, but—" She stopped. "Grant, you were calling a number I don't have anymore." I went back through September in my head. No new contact from her, no update, nothing. "I didn't get a new number for you," I said. "I know that now," she said, something quiet cracking at the edge of her voice. "I thought you had it. I was so sure I'd sent it." We were both still for a long time. I had called twice, she hadn't known. "Did you try to call me?" I asked. A pause. "I tried to reach you in October," she said, "when I was already in Vancouver and everything felt wrong and I wanted to explain. I called twice. Both times went to voicemail." A breath. "I assumed you'd seen it was me and chose not to pick up." Which was not what had happened. What had happened was that I had been avoiding every reminder of her for weeks, and she had been calling a number I hadn't changed, a number I'd still had, and I hadn't picked up because I hadn't recognized the incoming number. Because she had a new number. Because I had called hers twice and reached nobody. Because we had both called, both tried, twice each, and none of it had landed. I pushed myself up onto one elbow. Layla had sat up too. I could just make out her face in the faint light under the sunroom door. I picked up for an unknown number, I said slowly. You wouldn't have known it was me, she said. My new number wouldn't have been saved on your end. I sat with that for a second. Because I remembered this. Sometime in October, 2 calls from a number I didn't recognize. I'd figured they were spam. I had let them go to voicemail. I had not listened to the voicemails because I had been spending considerable energy convincing myself I was fine, and listening to voicemails from unidentified numbers had seemed like a strange way to continue that project. I pressed a hand over my face. Grant, she said. I didn't listen to the voicemails, I said. The room went completely quiet. Then, barely above a whisper, oh. 1 syllable, but I heard everything in it. I thought they were spam, I said. I didn't. I stopped. There was no version of that sentence that made me feel less terrible. I didn't know it was you. She didn't say anything for a long time. So we both called twice, she finally said. Yeah. And neither of us got through. No. The silence after that was different from all the previous ones. Not the silence of 2 people avoiding something. The silence of 2 people recalibrating a story they'd been telling themselves for 8 months. Finding the measurements were all wrong. Why didn't you tell me about Vancouver? I said, before you accepted, before any of it. She let out a slow breath. Because I'd been thinking about leaving for over a year, she said, and every time I tried to bring it up with you, it felt too large for whatever room we were in. What do you mean too large? She turned her head toward me. I could see the shape of her profile. I mean, it wasn't really about the job, she said. I'd started wanting something I didn't know how to name. And I thought if I put some distance between us, I'd figure out whether it was real or whether I'd just. She paused. I thought distance would clarify things. Did it? A small, exhausted sound. Not quite a laugh, yes, in the worst way possible. What did it clarify? She was quiet for a moment. Then, that the things I kept comparing to Vancouver, the people, the coffee, the view from the office window, I was comparing them to you. Which isn't fair to Vancouver or to me, but I kept doing it anyway. A pause. Cities are bad at being specific people, in case you were wondering. That landed somewhere I hadn't prepared for. Layla. I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I'm just telling you, since we're apparently doing this now. I have to tell you something, I said. She waited. In September, I said, before the LinkedIn thing, I bought 2 tickets to an Alves show in Toronto for October. I watched her expression in the dim light. You'd mentioned them at least 3 times that summer. I thought it would be a good surprise. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you. The cottage went completely still. You had tickets, she said slowly. Yeah. For October. Yeah. A long silence. Grant, she said, very quietly. I was already in Vancouver by the time that show happened. I know, I said. I know that now. She closed her eyes and opened them again. So you were planning something for us, she said, and I was planning to leave. At the same time, and neither of us knew about the other one. Yeah. She put a hand over her mouth, sat there for a second, then she said muffled, we are genuinely terrible at this. We really are, I said, and I heard myself laugh, quietly, in the way you laugh when something has been awful for a long time, and you've only just now seen the full shape of it. Layla lowered her hand and looked at me. I don't know what to do with all of this, she said. Me neither, I said, but I think I'm done building stories about you that aren't true. She was still for a moment. What does that mean? It means I spent 8 months deciding you didn't care. And you spent 8 months deciding I didn't want to hear from you. And we were both completely wrong. I held her gaze in the dark. I'd like to stop doing that. She looked at me for a long moment, searching, checking whether I meant it in the way that mattered. Then she said quietly, what version would you want instead? The one where you call me when you're thinking about making a big decision, I said. The one where I actually listen to my voicemails a beat. The one where we stop deciding what the other person means before bothering to ask them. That's very reasonable, she said, annoyingly so. I'm working on being better at it. A real smile, the first one I'd seen from her all weekend. It landed the same way it always had, which told me something I supposed I'd already known for a long time. The wall behind us gave one deliberate knock. We both went still. If you two are in there resolving things, Piper's voice came through the drywall, muffled but absolutely clear. Please keep it below a 6. Some of us have a caterer's video call at 8 in the morning. Layla buried her face in the blanket. I stared at the wall. She planned this. Obviously she planned this, Layla said, voice muffled. I'm going to revoke her cottage privileges. You don't own the cottage. I'll revoke something, I said. Layla emerged from the blanket, laughing quietly, and in the dark of my sister's sunroom, she reached across and found my hand. Not dramatic, not hesitant, just a choice, made small and sure. I held on. And that was where we stayed, with the lake making quiet sounds outside, and the old cottage doing what old cottages do, and a lot of truth sitting between us that was no longer anyone's secret. Morning came with pale light through the screen door and the smell of Russell making coffee badly. I woke up to Layla's shoulder warm against mine, our hands still loosely connected under the blanket. She was already awake, looking at the ceiling with the expression of someone who'd been thinking for a while. Hi, I said. Hi, she said. We didn't move right away. The kind of stillness that happens when a night has meant something, and the morning is asking you to confirm it in daylight. Are we going to be weird? She asked. Probably, I said, for a bit. Fair. Are we going to be weird indefinitely? No, I said. She turned her head and looked at me the way she used to look at problems, direct, a little careful, figuring out whether it held up. Then she nodded once, and something eased in her expression. We made it to the kitchen eventually. Piper had already made a real pot of coffee and was sitting at the table with her binder of venue photographs, radiating the energy of a person who has been proven completely correct and is choosing, charitably, not to say so. She pushed 2 mugs toward us without comment. Russell glanced between us once and very deliberately looked at his phone. Layla sat beside me, not across, beside. Her knee found mine under the table and neither of us moved it. Later that morning, while Piper sorted through catering proposals and Russell finally addressed the dock board that had been groaning since Thursday, Layla and I took our refilled mugs down to the water. The loose plank announced us as we walked out. The lake was flat and silver in the late morning light. The birches on the far shore had already started to turn at the edges. Just barely, just the first suggestion of it. This is strange, Layla said. Which part? This, she gestured between us, being okay this quickly. I turned to look at her. I don't think it's quick, I said. I think it's late. She went quiet. We already did the hard part, I said, just separately in the most inefficient way possible. I held her gaze. I don't want to do the next part that way. What's the next part? The part where we say things before they become 8 months of silence, I said. The part where I listen to voice credit emails from numbers I don't recognize. I paused. The part where you don't relocate to another province to figure out something you could have just asked me. She gave me a look. That's very pointed. It is. A beat. You should have listened to your voicemails. I know, I said. I'm going to be embarrassed about that for a while. Good, but the corner of her mouth had moved. I want the version where you tell me when you buy concert tickets. Done. And the version where I can tell you when something feels too big without deciding in advance how you're going to take it. Done, I said both of those. She looked at me for a moment, then she held out her hand, palm up, between us. Like we were starting something, which, I supposed, we were. I put my hand in hers. We stood there on the dock while the lake did what lakes do in late summer and the birches held their early color, and somewhere behind us, Russell dropped something on the porch, and Piper told him to leave it. Entirely ordinary, completely specific. The kind of morning that means nothing, and, depending on who's standing in it, everything. A few months later, nothing about it felt as fragile as I'd feared it might. That was the part that surprised me most. Layla's Vancouver contract had always been 1 year. She'd planned to return regardless, which was a fact she mentioned casually in October in a way that made me realize how many assumptions I'd been living inside. She came back and slid into the city the way water finds its level. We still argued about which radio station ran better morning programming. She still took food off my plate whenever it looked more appealing than hers, which was always. I still drove her home in bad weather because her winter tires were aspirational rather than actual. The only difference was that now I said what I meant, and so did she, and neither of us had to pretend that didn't change the whole shape of things. Piper, naturally, took complete credit for all of it. If you were in my position, 8 months of silence that turned out to be 8 months of missed calls and a wrong phone number, what would you have done differently? Tell me in the comments, and if this one found you at the right moment, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next